One more. The one about money was not that entertaining. It was interesting, but not that entertaining. Appendix Zane, Property and Privilege. This begins with 3 quotes from the same guy. Property is theft, P.J. Proudhon. Property is liberty, P.J. Proudhon. Property is impossible, P.J. Proudhon. And then one from Ralph Waldo Emerson. Consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds. Proudhon, by piling up his contradictions this way, was not merely being French. It was Proudhon. He was trying to indicate that the abstraction property covers a variety of phenomena, some pernicious and some beneficial. Let us borrow a device from the semanticists and examine his triad with transcripts attached for maximum clarity. Property is theft means that property created by the artificial laws of feudal, capitalist, and other authoritarian societies is based on armed robbery. Land titles, for instance, are clear examples of property. Swords and shot were the original coins of transaction. Property is liberty means that property, that which will be voluntarily honored in a voluntary (anarchist) society, is the foundation of the liberty in that society. The more people's interests are commingled and confused, as in collectivism, the more they will be stepping on each other's toes. Only when the rules of the game declare clearly, this is mine and this is thine, and the game is voluntarily accepted as worthwhile by all parties to it, can true independence be achieved. Property is impossible means that property equal property. Property A is impossible means that property A equals property I. I don't understand those footnotes, or whatever those symbols are after that. Just plow through it and see if it makes sense. Property is impossible means that property creates so much conflict of interest that society is in perpetual undeclared civil war and must eventually devour itself and properties and the little a as well. In short, Proudhon, in his own way, foresaw the snafu principle. He also foresaw that communism would only perpetuate and aggravate the conflicts, and that anarchy is the only viable alternative to this chaos. It is not averred, of course, that property will come into existence only in a totally voluntary society. Many forms of it already exist. The error of most alleged libertarians, especially the followers, in parentheses, exclamation point, of the egregious Ayn Rand, is to assume that all property is property. The distinction can be made by any IQ above 70 and is absurdly simple. The test is to ask, of any title of ownership you are asked to accept, or which you ask others to accept, would this be honored in a free society of rationalists, or does it require the armed might of a state to force people to honor it? If it is the former, it is property and represents liberty. If it is the latter, it is property and represents theft. Well, that's it for that appendix. And here's a really short one. Appendix Cheth, Hagbard's Abdication. Readers who do not understand the scene in which Hagbard abdicates in favor of Miss Portinari should take heart. Once they do understand it, they will understand most of the mysteries of all schools of mysticism. And that's obviously something that happened earlier in the book. Appendix, that's the end of that appendix. Now, Appendix Lamed, the Tactics of Magic with a K. And there's a quote. The human brain evidently operates on some variation of the famous principle enunciated in The Hunting of the Snark. What I tell you 3 times is true. This quote is attributed to Norbert Wiener from his work, Cybernetics. The most important idea in the book of Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage is the simple-looking formula, invoke often. The most successful form of treatment for so-called mental disorders, the behavior therapy of Pavlov, Skinner, Wolpe et al. Could well be summarized in 2 similar words, reinforce often. Reinforcement, for all practical purposes, means the same thing as the layman's term reward. The essence of behavioral therapy is rewarding desired behavior. The behavior, as if by magic, begins to occur more and more often as the rewards continue. Advertising, as everyone knows, is based on the axiom repeat often. Those who think they are materialists and think that materialism requires them to deny all facts which do not square with their definition of matter are loath to admit the well-documented and extensive list of individuals who have been cured of serious maladies by that very vulgar and absurd form of magic known as Christian Science. Nonetheless, the reader who wants to understand this classic work of immoral literature will have to analyze its deepest meanings, guided by an awareness that there is no essential difference between magic, behavior therapy, advertising, and Christian Science. All of them can be condensed into Abramelin's simple invoke often. Reality, as Simon Moon says, is thermoplastic, not thermosetting. It is not quite silly putty, as Mr. Paul Krasner once claimed, but is much closer to silly putty than we generally realize. If you are told often enough that Budweiser is the king of beers, Budweiser will eventually taste somewhat better, perhaps a great deal better, than it tasted before this magic spell was cast. If a behavior therapist in the pay of the communists rewards you every time you repeat a communist slogan, you will repeat it more often and begin to slide imperceptibly towards the same kind of belief that Christian Scientists have for their mantras. And if a Christian Scientist tells himself every day that his ulcer is going away, the ulcer will disappear more rapidly than it would have had he not subjected himself to this homemade advertising campaign. Finally, if a magician invokes the great god Pan often enough, the great god Pan will appear just as certainly as a heterosexual behavior appears in homosexuals who are being handled or manhandled by behavior therapy. The opposite and reciprocal of invoke often is banish often. The magician wishing for a manifestation of Pan will not only invoke Pan directly and verbally, create Pan-like conditions in his temple, reinforce Pan associations in every gesture and every article of furniture, use the colors and perfumes associated with Pan, etc. He will also banish other gods verbally, banish them by removing their associated furnitures and colors and perfumes, and banish them in every other way. The behavior therapist calls this negative reinforcement, and in treating a patient who is afraid of elevators, he will not only reinforce or reward every instance in which the patient rides an elevator without terror, but will also negatively reinforce or punish each indication of terror shown by the patient. What's up, girl? What'd you find? Anything? The Christian Scientist, of course, uses a mantra or spell which both reinforces health and negatively reinforces or banishes illness. And then there's a footnote that says, the basic Christian Science mantra, known as the scientific statement of being, no less, is as follows. There is no life, truth, intelligence, nor substance in matter. All is infinite mind and is infinite manifestation, for God is all in all. Spirit is immortal truth. Matter is mortal error. Spirit is the real and eternal. Matter is the unreal and temporal. Spirit is God, and man is his image and likeness. Therefore, man is not material, he is spiritual. The fact that these statements are, in terms of the scientific criteria, meaningless, non-operational, and footless is actually totally irrelevant. They work. Try them and see. As Aleister Crowley, no friend of Mrs. Eddy's, wrote, enough of because. May he be damned for a dog. Okay. Similarly, a commercial not only motivates the listener towards the sponsor's product, but discourages interest in all false gods by subsuming them under the rubric of the despised and contemptible brand X. Hypnotism, debate, and countless other games have the same mechanism: invoke often and banish often. The reader who seeks a deeper understanding of this argument can obtain it by putting these principles to the test. If you are afraid that you might, in this Christian environment, fall into taking the Christian Science mantra too seriously, try instead the following simple experiment. For 40 days and 40 nights, begin each day by invoking and praising the world in itself as an expression of the Egyptian deities. Recite at dawn, I bless Ra, the fierce sun burning bright. I bless Isis Luma in the night. I bless the air, the Horus hawk. I bless the earth on which I walk. Repeat at moonrise. Continue for the full 40 days and 40 nights. We say, without any reservation, that at a minimum, you will feel happier and more at home in this part of the galaxy. Excuse me. We'll also understand better Uncle John Feather's attitude towards our planet. At maximum, you may find rewards beyond your expectations and will be converted to using this mantra for the rest of your life. If the results are exceptionally good, you just might start believing in ancient Egyptian gods. A selection of magic techniques which will offend the reason of no materialist can be found in Laura Arcara Huxley's You Are Not the Target, a powerful mantra, the title, and Gestalt Therapy by Pearls, Hefferline, and Goodman, and in Mind Games by Masters and Houston. All of this, of course, is programming your own trip by manipulating appropriate clusters of word, sound, image, and emotional prajna energy. The aspect of magic which puzzles, perplexes, and provokes the modern mentality is that in which the operator programs somebody else's trip, acting at a distance. It is incredible and insulting to this type of person if one asserts that Mr. Nkrumah Fubar could program a headache for the President of the United States. He might grant that such manipulation of energy is possible if the President was told about Mr. Fubar's spells, but he will not accept that it works just as well when the subject has no conscious knowledge of the curse. The magical theory that 5 equals 6 has no conviction for such a skeptic, and magicians have not yet proposed a better theory. The materialist then asserts that all cases where magic did appear to work under this handicap are illusions, delusions, hallucinations, coincidences, in quotes, with the footnote, look up the etymology of that word sometime and see if it means anything, misapprehensions, luck, accident, or downright hoax. He does not seem to realize that asserting this is equivalent to asserting that reality is, after all, thermoplastic, for he is admitting that many people live in a different reality than his own. Rather than leave him to grapple as best he can with this self-contradiction, we suggest that he consult Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain by Ostrander and Schroeder, especially Chapter 11, From Animals to Cybernetics, The Search for a Theory of Psi. He might realize that when matter, in quotes, is fully understood, there is nothing a materialist need reject in magic, action at a distance, which has been well explored by scientists committed to the rigid Marxist form of dialectical materialism. Those who have kept alive the ancient traditions of magic, such as the Ordo Templi Orientalis, will realize that the essential secret is sexual, as Saul tries to explain in the 6th trip, and that more light can be found in the writings of Wilhelm Reich, M.D., than in the current Soviet research. But Dr. Reich was jailed as a quack by the U.S. government, and we would not ask our readers to consider the possibility that the U.S. government could ever be wrong about anything. Any psychoanalyst will guess at once the most probable symbolic meanings of the rose and the cross, but no psychologist engaged in psi research has applied this key to the deciphering of traditional magic texts. The earliest reference to Freemasonry in English occurs in Anderson's Muses Threnody from 1638, and here's the quote: "For we, brethren of the rosy cross, we have the Mason word and second sight." But no parapsychologist has followed up the obvious clue contained in this conjunction of the vaginal role, the phallic cross, the word of invocation, and the phenomenon of thought projection. That the taboos against sexuality are still latent in our culture explains part of this blindness. Fear of opening the door to the most insidious and subtle forms of paranoia is another part. If the magic can work at a distance, the repressed thought goes, which of us is safe? A close and objective study of the anti-LSD hysteria in America will shed further light on the mechanisms of avoidance here discussed. Of course, there are further offenses and affronts to the rationalist in the deeper study of magic. We all know, for instance, that words are only arbitrary conventions with no intrinsic connection to the things they symbolize, yet magic involves the use of words in a manner that seems to imply that some such connection or even identity actually exists. The reader might analyze some powerful bits of language not generally considered magical, right, pup? And he will find something of the key. For instance, the 2+3 pattern in Hail Eris, All Hail Discordia is not unlike the 2+3 in Holy Mary, Mother of God, or that in the LS/MFT, which once sold many cartons of cigarettes to our parents, and the 2+3 in Crowley's Iopan, who's relative of these. Thus, when a magician says that you must shout abrahadabra and no other word at the most intensely emotional point in an invocation, he exaggerates. You may substitute other words, but you will abort the result if you depart too far from the 5-beat pattern of abrahadabra. And then there's a footnote. A glance at the end of Appendix Beth will save the reader from misunderstanding the true tenor of these remarks. We haven't gotten to Appendix Beth yet, but I'm sure it's coming. But this brings us to the magical theory of reality. Mahatma Guru Sri Paramahansa Shivaji, and there's a footnote for him too. We'll read the footnote. Aleister Crowley, again under another pen name, writes in Yoga for Yahoos. So I don't think any of these books would be interesting to look up and see if any of them are real. Yoga for Yahoos by Mahatma Guru Sri Paramahansa Shivaji, who's actually Aleister Crowley, and supposedly wrote, "Let us consider a piece of cheese. We say that this has certain qualities: shape, structure, color, solidity, weight, taste, smell, consistency, and the rest, but investigation has shown that this is all illusory. Where are these qualities? Not in the cheese, for different observers give quite different accounts of it. Not in ourselves, for we do not perceive them in the absence of the cheese. What then are these qualities of which we are so sure? They would not exist without our brains. They would not exist without the cheese. They are the result of the union, that is, of the yoga, of the seer and the seen, of the subject and object." That's the quote. There is nothing here with which a modern physicist could quarrel, and this is the magical theory of the universe. The magician assumes that sensed reality, the panorama of impressions monitored by the senses and collated by the brain, is radically different from so-called objective reality. Of course, there's a footnote with that, and that says, see the anthology Perception, edited by Robert Blake, Ph.D., and especially the chapter by psychologist Carl Rogers, which demonstrates that people's perceptions change while they are in psychotherapy. As William Blake noted, the fool sees not the same tree that the wise man sees. About the latter reality, we can only form speculations or theories which, if we are very careful and subtle, will not contradict either logic or the reports of the senses. This lack of contradiction is rare. Some conflicts between theory and logic, or between theory and sense data, are not discovered for centuries. For example, the wandering of Mercury away from the Newtonian calculation of its orbit. And even when achieved, lack of contradiction is proof only that the theory is not totally false. It is never, in any case, proof that the theory is totally true. It is never, in any case, proof that the theory is totally true, for an indefinite number of such theories can be constructed from the known data at any time. For instance, the geometries of Euclid, of Gauss and Riemann, of Lobachevsky, and of Fuller all work well enough on the surface of the Earth, and it is not yet clear whether Gauss, Riemann, or the Fuller systems work better in interstellar space. There's a bird building a nest in the gutter of this house, which is not good. It means I need to clear out the gutters, but just so the everyone can see what is distracting me. Oh, you can't zoom in when it's a selfie thing, but if you can look carefully right there, my finger, it's hard to do. There is where the bird is. One of the things I did not want to do on my staycation is clean out the gutters, but that's sort of my... There's a bunch of them in there. No, there's just the one. All right. Sorry about that. We're going to see, how much longer is this? Oh, this is really long. All right, we're going to do just a little bit more of this. If we have this much freedom in choosing our theories about objective reality, we have even more liberty in deciphering the given or transactional sense reality. The ordinary person senses as he or she has been taught to sense, that is, they have been programmed by their society. The magician is a self-programmer, using invocation and evocation, which are functionally identical with self-conditioning, auto-suggestion, and hypnosis, as shown above. He or she edits or orchestrates sensed reality like an artist. And there's another footnote. Everybody, of course, does this unconsciously. See the paragraph about the cheese. The magician, doing it consciously, controls it. This book, being part of the only serious conspiracy it describes, that is, part of Operation Mindfuck, has programmed the reader in ways that he or she will not understand for a period of months or perhaps years. Uh-oh. When that understanding is achieved, the real import of this appendix and of the equation 5 = 6 will be clear. I wonder if it's doing it to you guys too, if you're listening to this. Officials at Harvard thought Dr. Timothy Leary was joking when he warned that students should not be allowed to indiscriminately remove dangerous habit-forming books from the library unless each student proves a definite need for each volume. For instance, you have lost track of Joe Malik's Mysterious Dogs by now. It is strange that no one can make the clearest possible statements and yet be understood by many to have said the opposite. The Rite of Shiva, as performed by Joe Malik during the SSS Black Mass, I don't think I read that part with you guys, contains the central secret of all magic, very explicitly, yet most people can reread that section a dozen or 100 times and never understand what the secret is. For instance, Miss Portinari was a typical Catholic girl in every way, except for an unusual tendency to take Catholicism seriously, until she began menstruating and performing spiritual meditations every day. Footnote, these two signs of growth often appear at the same time, being DNA-triggered openings of the fourth neural circuit. One morning, during her meditation period, she visualized the Sacred Heart of Jesus with unusual clarity. Immediately, another image, distinctly shocking to her, came to mind with equal vividness. She recounted this experience to her confessor the next Saturday, and he warned her gravely that meditation was not healthy for a young girl, unless she intended to take the oath of seclusion and enter a convent. She had no intention of doing that, but rebelliously and guiltily continued her meditations anyway. The disturbing second image persisted whenever she thought of the Sacred Heart. She began to suspect that this was sent by the devil to distract her from meditation. So I feel like I should plow through with this so you guys can be programmed just like is happening to me. One weekend, when she was home from convent school on vacation, her parents decided she was the right age to be introduced to Roman society. Actually, they, like most well-off Italian families, had already chosen which daughter would be given to the church, and it wasn't her. Hence, this early introduction to La Dolce Vita. One of the outstanding ornaments of Rome at that time was the eccentric international businessman, Mr. Hagbard Celine, and he was at the party to which Miss Portinari was taken that evening. It was around 11, and she had consumed perhaps a little too much Piper Heidsieck, which she happened to find herself standing near a small group who were listening raptly to a story the strange Celine was telling. Miss Portinari wondered what this creature might be saying, and he was reputedly even more cynical and materialistic than other international money grubbers, and Miss Portinari was, at that time, the kind of conservative Catholic idealist who finds capitalists even more dreadful than socialists. She idly tuned in on his words. He was talking English, but she understood that language adequately. Son, son, Hagbard recited, with two beautiful women throwing themselves at you, why are you sitting alone in your room jacking off? Miss Portinari blushed furiously and drank some more champagne to conceal it. She hated the man already, knowing that she would surrender her virginity to him at the earliest opportunity. Of such complexities are intellectual Catholic adolescents capable. And the boy replied, Hagbard went on, I guess you just answered your own question, Ma. There was a shocked silence. The case is quite typical, Hagbard added blandly, obviously finished. Professor Freud recounts even more startling family dramas. I don't see, a celebrated French auto racer began, frowning. Then he smiled. Oh, he said. Was the boy an American? Miss Portinari left the group perhaps a bit too hurriedly. She felt a few eyes following her and quickly refilled her champagne glass. A half hour later, she was standing on the veranda, trying to clear her head in the night air, when a shadow moved near her and Celine appeared amid a cloud of cigar smoke. The moon has a fat jaw tonight, he said in Italian. Looks like somebody punched her in the mouth. Are you a poet in addition to your other accomplishments? She asked coolly. That sounds as if it might be American verse. He laughed, a clear peal like a stallion whinnying. Quite so, he said. I just came from Rapallo, where I was talking to America's major poet of this century. How old are you? He asked suddenly. Almost 16, she said, fumbling the words. Almost 15, he corrected ungallantly. If it's any affair of yours, it might be, he replied easily. I need a girl your age for something I have in mind. I can imagine something foul. He stepped further out of the shadows and closer. Child, he said, are you religious? I suppose you regard that as old-fashioned, she replied, imagining his mouth on her breast and thinking of paintings of Mary nursing the infant. At this point in history, he said simply, it is the only thing that isn't old-fashioned. What was your birth date? Never mind. You must be a Virgo. I am, she said. His teeth would bite her nipple, but very gently. He would know enough to do that. But that is superstition, not religion. I wish I could draw a precise line between religion, superstition, and science, he smiled. I find that they keep running together. You are Catholic, of course. His persistence was maddening. I'm too proud to believe in absurdity, and therefore I am not a Protestant, she replied, immediately fearing that he would recognize the plagiarism. What symbol means the most to you, he asked, with the blandness of a prosecuting attorney setting a trap. The cross, she said quickly. She didn't want him to know the truth. No, he again corrected her ungallantly. The Sacred Heart. Then she knew he was of Satan's party. I must go, she said. Meditate further on the Sacred Heart, he said, his eyes blazing like a hypnotist's. A cornball gimmick, he was thinking privately, but it might work. Meditate on it deeply, child. You will find in it the essential of Catholicism and the essential of all other religion. I think you're mad, she responded, leaving the veranda with undignified haste. But 2 weeks later, during her morning meditation, she suddenly understood the Sacred Heart. At lunchtime, she disappeared, leaving behind a note to the Mother Superior of the convent school and another note for her parents, and went in search of Hagbard. She had even more potential than he realized, and, as elsewhere recorded, within 2 years, he abdicated in her favor. They never became lovers. Footnote, they were quite good friends, though, and he did fuck her occasionally. All right, we'll stop there. So you guys won't be programmed by this book. I'm doomed to finish it, and that's going to happen to me. So goodbye.